And by doing it slowly and over time, you're making wiser decisions. You're getting more comfortable at every temperature range, right? Every level of cash that you're working with. And by staying behind the curve and keeping the gap between what's coming in and what's going out as big as you can, you're going to build wealth, which essentially gives you the ability 5, 10, 20 years down the road to say screw you to everybody.
You are tuned in to the Money Script Podcast. Today we will share strategies to help you grow your financial literacy and improve your money script. I'll be back with some important announcements. Until then, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Money Script Podcast. It's your host, Johannes Harrison. So happy to be with each and every one of you today. I am so excited about today's show. I have a very unique guest, and this is someone that has been practicing something that I've been a huge fan of for a long time. So he's going to be our resident expert. We'll get to him in a second, but really quickly, I want to encourage each and every one of you to find a graduate and tell them congratulations. By the way, I'm about to be one of those graduates. Yes, this was my own shameless little plug. As I'm recording this, I'm a week away from graduating from Morehouse College, I've spoken about the college in the past, so some of you are aware of that. And our keynote speaker is President Biden. Yes, it caused a whole bunch of uproar and hoopla about the fact, Biden this and Biden that. Listen, he's the current sitting president of the United States. I've never seen a president speak in real life before, other than on television. So I am thrilled to have President Biden come to my graduation. Yeah, I said it. I'm being selfish about it. President Biden's coming to my graduation. So don't be surprised if when some podcasts come up after this, I say, last week when I was with President Biden, he said this. And yes, I'm going to say it like we were just hanging out together, because we were for like a couple hours. It was just us, Secret Service. He didn't bring the dogs, though. The dogs weren't allowed to come because I've heard they're a little dangerous. So without any further ado, you are on the Money Script. You're listening to the Money Script Podcast, where we are going to talk about all things money. I am a financial advisor. I help people align their goals with their values and their financial behaviors. And this is your dose of financial literacy to help you just get some little snippets, little tidbits that will drive you a little bit closer to making better financial decisions for yourself, and hopefully get you to a position where you want to seek some information and learn a little bit more, and maybe even hire a financial advisor, whether it's me or somebody else. Get some help so that you can do better with your finances. So with that, I want to bring into the room my new friend, Rocky Lalvani. Rocky, welcome to the Money Script Podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. By the way, Joe Biden's from Scranton. At least he says he is when he talks to me.
He talks about it all the time. It's like his biggest claim to fame, back in Scranton.
Yeah, there's not much in Scranton.
Are you in Scranton?
No, I wouldn't want to live there. It's gray.
Yeah, Scranton. Yeah. So I also have family. I'm from the East Coast originally. So my grandfather owned property in East Stroudsburg.
No, that's close.
So yeah. So that was, I'm very familiar with those old stomping grounds. So Rocky is a profit first. Is it specialist? Is that the term we use?
They use
advisor,
professional,
profit first professional. He's got the book in the background there. I can see that. I've read that book probably close to a decade ago. It changed my life of how I run my business, how I operate, and just gave me a way to think about things, of bifurcating things into different accounts. If you haven't read the book, we'll put a link in the show notes. Feel free to go give that book a listen or a read and see it how it can help you. You got traction back there too. You got some good books back there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rocky,
some of them fell down.
Rocky, tell us a bit about your journey, financial service. I know you were in corporate America for a while, and then you retired. And now you have this hobby. I guess we should call it a hobby, but now you have a mission more of helping people with their finances. Just kind of tell us how you got from here to there.
So actually, most of my corporate career was selling to physicians.
Oh,
And
right up
there's
our
one
alley.
thing I learned way, way back when. There's one thing they don't talk about in medical school: money. Matter of fact, it's a taboo subject. And so it's one of the reasons I think that most doctors struggle with money. And just because I was always in the hospitals, grand rounds, conferences, everywhere else. So I got to see what they were seeing. And honestly, I think they became targets. People
Mm.
go after them because they make money and they got egos. And so that's a perfect combination for you to make money off of them. Um,
Yeah, you are not
and
lying.
we used to have a lot of conversations around money because I've always been a financial geek. And so we would just talk about how do you actually build wealth. And, over the years, I was shocked to learn much later that physicians are not so good about building wealth. And I'm like, how is that possible?
I wondered the same thing. So when I started in my career, I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to start working with doctors early on. I had my first three doctors were an OB, an emergency room physician, and a podiatrist. And simultaneously, I had a couple of clients that were NFL athletes. One was soon to be retired NFL. One was a first round draft pick. Was he first? Yeah, he's first round draft pick. And then the other was the sibling of the one that was soon to be retired. So, different stages of life there. And I came to the conclusion that my athletes were making just as much money as the doctors were, just in a shorter period of time. So it was that much more ego, that much more opportunities to make big financial mistakes that are hard to recover from. And like you said, a lot of people, businesses and and the like, would prey on their ego, prey on their lack of knowledge, and also prey on the fact that, especially when it comes to lending, and this is one of my biggest frustrations with the lending industry, is that because their first name is doctor or they work for the NFL, NBA, what have you, you just lend them as much money as they want. I've seen doctors like there's loans out there that doctors can get for their house with no money down, and they can borrow far more than they can truly afford to pay back or afford to pay on a monthly basis. But the banks would just give it to them because their first name's doctor. And the same thing with athletes. I'm like, this is crazy that they and that's why I like to tell people the banks don't care. And again, I'm not picking on any of the banks in particular, but I don't think they really care. At least I can't tell that they do.
They charge them more interest. That's what they don't
Mhm.
realize. They are paying a premium interest rate on top of that. It's funny, and I don't know the stats for the sports industry for pro sports, but I would guess pro sports a couple years outside of retirement and a very young retirement, most of them are broke.
80%. That's the number.
Mm, okay, there you
80%.
go.
80%. 8 out of 10 will be broke and or bankrupt
Yeah.
within 2 years of ceasing to play the sport. Because you can have an early premature retirement, injuries, that sort of thing, or you can have a regular retirement and you lived out your years and played as long as you can. 8 out of 10. That's the
Not
numbers.
good. So
Not good.
honestly, my first foray was into the personal finance side. I didn't want to be an investment guy, but just teaching people how to be smarter with money. And I learned something that if I had just listened to Warren Buffett, I would have known. Nobody wants to get rich slowly. And
No.
everything I teach is how to get rich slowly. And they're like, "Oh yeah." So I actually shifted from that to business finance, and business owners are at least willing to listen a little bit more. They got to make payroll, so they're willing to listen. And honestly, profit first is nothing more than personal finance principles applied to business finance. That's all it is.
Mm.
And it's the same thing as like the envelope system. You familiar with like Dave
Oh
Ramsey always?
yeah, the
Yeah,
envelope.
it's
Yeah, oh
it's
yeah. Oh
the
yeah.
exact same thing. There's no
Yeah.
difference. It's just we're using bank accounts instead of envelopes. We're giving every dollar a purpose. We're paying ourselves first, and we're building reserves and savings. And as long as you do that, everything's wonderful.
I have a funny anecdote about the envelope system. as it relates to inflation, which I know we are grappling with right now across America. But let's say you were doing the envelope system, and in one of your envelopes, you decided to put, $25 for, or 50, we'll use $50, probably more appropriate, $50 for gas. And let's say you lost that envelope and then you found it 5 years later. That $50 probably isn't going to fill up your gas tank. Why? Because of inflation. So I understand the envelope system, and I tell people, hey, this can work, especially if you're someone that deals in a lot of cash and tips and things of that nature. But these days, the envelope system is getting harder and harder to be able to manage because you're dealing with so many moving targets, and you have so many vendors that just don't accept cash anymore.
Yeah, there are digital envelope systems now.
True, there are, yes.
So
yes.
you can use digital. And honestly, the way I look at it is just have one envelope, which is one bank account for your spending. And as long as you can stay within that spending limit every month, life is good. But beyond that envelope, all your savings is getting taken out before you even see your money. And so it might be 401ks, retirement plans, after tax, investment plans. You can build a whole stack of those types of things. Suck all your excess cash out, hide it, and then just live within that budget that you're left with. I don't care if you spend it on gas or coffee or Costco, as long as you stay within the limit.
So I want to talk a little bit, Rocky, about transitions, because a lot of our listeners are in transition. So a lot of our listeners are either in their last year or so of college, or maybe in their last year or so of residency, medical school, or then residency, or fellowship, and getting ready to prepare for making some real money and entering into the real world. In your experience over the years and working with individuals in transition, what are some tips or some guidance that you can provide them to help them with that transition and becoming, the overnight thousandaire that some of them become?
So what I tell them is, especially once you're getting out and you're getting your first real big paying job, the first problem is you've been dealing with delayed gratification for a long time, right?
Oh,
because
yes.
everyone else is making money and you have not been able to. And if you run out and you go from living like a resident to living like a king, you're going to get yourself in trouble, because life is a hell of a lot more expensive than you can imagine. And that first contract you get, wherever you end up, is kind of like dating. They told you a bunch of stories. When you show up and you've been there a year, it may not be what you thought it was going to be. So if you get out and you buy a fancy house in a town that doesn't have a ton of fancy houses, you just created an anchor, right? You go out and you buy the fancy car, you've created another anchor. And if your lifestyle expenses get ahead of your pay, you are going to forever be behind the 8 ball. So what I tell them is, look, I know you've been living on X. Go out and spend double what you're living on now. Get a decent rental. If you don't have a decent car, buy a reasonable car. But I want you to get settled for a year or two. Start getting your loans under control if you've got loans. Get yourself settled. And once you're settled, you understand the town that you've moved to. You start to understand traffic patterns, schools, the things nobody ever talks about. You start to see what the nicer areas are, the areas you prefer to live in. 2 or 3 years later, then start to increase your spending. And by doing it slowly and over time, you're making wiser decisions. You're getting more comfortable at every temperature range, right? Every level of cash that you're working with. And by staying behind the curve and keeping the gap between what's coming in and what's going out as big as you can, you're going to build wealth, which essentially gives you the ability 5, 10, 20 years down the road to say screw you to everybody, right? Because you might want to walk
screw
away.
you money. Yes, you want that screw you money.
And you don't, screw you money doesn't have to be that much. You just need enough to say, I'm out of here. I'm not putting up with this. I can survive for a year till I get resettled. I don't need you. And that is really what I want people to build towards. Is having that little bit of excess. And let's face it, depending on your specialty is really going to determine your income, right? So
True.
I don't know what the top specialties are right now, but let's just say the cardiologists and the ortho surgeons are making double what the other doctors are. Go live like the other doctors if you're the cardiologist or the ortho, and you're going to be just as happy as they are. You don't have to live so fancy, and you will have a ton of excess cash flow. And if you're that other doc, there's some doc making half of what you're making. So, live like they are for a while and just get used to it. And as long as you stay behind the curve and you can keep making, as you keep making more, keep spending more, but stay behind that gap.
Indeed. Yeah. The desire to, the old phrase, keep up with the Joneses.
I hate the
Um,
Joneses.
the Joneses.
They
Yeah.
don't like
And
you either.
so I've ran into situations with physicians, brand new physicians, where they've been told by another physician that's already been practicing 10, 15 years, what have you. Why are you parking that beat up car in the parking garage? You're a doctor now. You should look like a doctor. Go buy a nicer car. And I'm like, that person has been in practice for 20 years and probably be in practice for another 20 because they've been spending all of their money. And they are, again, always behind the 8 ball. I've met physicians that are in their late 50s, early 60s, and they've come and sat down with me and say, hey, I want to talk about retirement. And I have to deliver the sad, unfortunate news of not going to happen. You just bought a new house and you got these cars and you've committed to pay for your kids' college because you don't want them to borrow. You didn't save enough. You've been living this lifestyle living the lifestyle of the person that makes, a third to 2 times more than you. And you just didn't save enough. And so if you can start early, as Rocky was saying, and just, yes, increase your lifestyle a little bit, but not all the way to the max. And the other thing that you got to remember, Uncle Sam wants some of your money.
Yeah.
Not once. He demands some of your money. And especially for those physicians that that get the side hustles or the moonlight gigs, one of the biggest mistakes they make on those side hustles is you don't withhold enough taxes for it. And you come sit down for tax time. It's like, how do I owe $30,000? Okay, because you made 300 and you only withheld 80.
Well, so here's the thing: depending on where you live, if you are doing a side hustle, that side hustle sits on top of your regular income, and it also sits on top of your spouse's income. It is not unheard of that half of that income goes to the tax man. Between state, local, FICA, all that stuff, you've got to be very careful because they are going to take a very large chunk of it, depending on where you live. So you always have to make sure you put the money aside for taxes so that you can stroke that check. And the other thing is pick a frugal spouse. Honestly,
I know there's probably a few listeners right now that, as that was said, if their spouse was next to them, they probably just gave them an evil look. Frugalness can be taught. It's a conversation that you're going to have many, many times. It can be taught. But if you've already chosen your spouse and they are not frugal, then maybe you're going to need to become the frugal one.
Somebody does.
Somebody does. Somebody does. So, Rocky, can you talk a little bit about? You briefly mentioned Profit First, and you said it's a method that you can apply to both personal and business income, and to help them. Can you just give our listeners a little bit more of a taste, because you're the first Profit First specialist that we've had on. So can you give our listeners a little bit more of a taste of what Profit First is and the concepts?
Yeah. So Profit First is basically a cash flow management system for business owners. It's based on a couple principles, and I'll talk about them. But basically, what it says is your accountant told you that the formula was sales minus expenses equals profit, which means profit's a leftover, it's an afterthought. And Mike said, no wonder we're all struggling. We're supposed to pay ourselves first. Why not do sales minus profit equals expenses? So that's that constraint system coming in, right? We take our profit, we pay ourselves first, and we also set money aside for taxes. And then this is the money I need to operate my business on. So you're constraining the business and putting the business essentially on a budget to live within. And that's basically the way that the system works. It comes down to Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says you will use up all the time and money allocated. So, even as in the personal finance world, you make a half million bucks, you'll spend a half million plus. In the business world, it's the same thing. You bring in a half a million in revenue, we tend to spend it all. And what that is, and what this system does is say, you know what, you might have brought in half a million, but you're supposed to get paid 200. The tax guy's taking 50. That means your business needs to run on 250. Otherwise, it's coming out of your pocket. And so that's basically what Profit First is set up bank accounts. When all your money comes in, put your profit aside, put your paycheck aside, put your tax money aside, and then take what's left, put it in your operating account for you, and learn to run your business on that. Because what happens with most business owners, just like people, they throw money at problems instead of actually being more resourceful. And when you do that, spending tends to go through the roof. It is not hard to spend money in business, just like it's not hard for you to
No, it's
spend
not hard
money.
to spend money, period.
Yeah,
Yeah,
period.
it's not.
Right.
No.
And so all you're doing is constraining the spending and saying, look, this is what we've got to live within, and we're going to constrain it, and we're going to figure out how to make it work within that budget. Otherwise, it's coming out of my pocket, and then I'm not making the money. And no offense, but the only person who cares about your money is you. So you might as well put a plan in place for it.
Might as well. I implemented Profit First into my business 9 years ago now. And one of my favorite parts of Profit First is tax time, because my CPA comes to me and says, all right, here's what you owe. And I expect to owe some taxes because of how my business is set up. I have profit. So there's going to be taxes that aren't withheld from my regular paycheck. So, but I calculate what that is and I set it aside. But without fail, nearly every year, the number he tells me is less than what I put away in my tax account. And I'm like, yippee. My wife loves it too, because she's also like, so did we pay the taxes? I'm like, yeah, we did. And how much was it? I was like, oh, it was, 7,000. And how much was in the tax account? I was like, oh, yeah, now you got to know that part too. She was like, I know you had more. You're right. I did. But I like that. Because then it's first of all, I'm not surprised that I owe. And I get to surprise my wife with, hey, here's some extra money that can go towards whatever other goal that we have. But I could just as easily say, no, I'm going to make that profit instead of put it in a tax account. But I feel a lot more comfortable in how I run my business, knowing that just in case, because I don't always have control of when vendors pay me. So just in case I do something in December and they pay me in December instead of January, and all of a sudden the taxes are a little bit more than I expected them to be, because that revenue came in, I've already set aside the portion of that that's going to go to taxes. And if I don't need it, great. But that is one of my favorite things to do each year. Then the profit part, I'm like, yeah, that's fun. Like, oh, here's the profit, I take that. But it's that tax one. Oh, I love that one.
It's funny because I've heard this story from so many business owners. And it just always amazes me that like they love tax time all of a sudden because they know they can stroke the check. They feel confident in their ability to handle it. And they just, and they get a bonus because a lot of times they have extra cash. I actually have a crap ton of extra cash in my in my tax account. I just I leave it there.
Mm,
I'm disciplined that way. I know a lot of people. I'm shocked at how many people don't have that kind of discipline, but I'm super disciplined that way. And I'd rather just let it build up because maybe in the future I'm like, "Oh, things are a little tight this month. I don't want to put as much in the tax account." And
mm.
so I'll play that game, but
I've played
yeah,
that game. I have. I've played that game. You know,
that
because
you
my
got to watch out for
yeah,
because
yeah,
if you get too far behind, you get your hand smacked.
yeah. No, that's true. That's true. But no, like you said, that I think, and that's really the feeling that I want my clients to feel as well, is that confidence of you're not anxious about the CPA sending the tax number.
Well,
You
let's
look
talk
forward
about
to it and you see it and you're like, oh, that's it. Hold on a second. I got that on me right now. Next.
the sucker tax.
The sucker tax?
See,
Which one?
yeah, well, these doctors, they got lots of income, right? And they hate paying income tax. Somebody comes along and says, "Hey, if you invest in this, you'll get a hundred
Oh,
thousand dollar tax deduction." And they go, "Cool, I'm going to go invest in this. I got $100,000 tax deduction. I didn't have to pay $30,000 in taxes." And then 2 years later, you call them up and you go, "Hey, how's that $100,000 investment doing?" "Oops, I forgot about that. Let me go check the balance. 0. Oops. You lost $70,000 to save 30. Like, seriously.
yeah.
That happens more often than you know because they're so focused on saving on taxes that they will actually lose money to do it. It just blows my
Mhm.
mind. Pay the taxes, move on with life.
Pay the
That's
taxes,
what
move on.
yeah, that's what
Move.
happens when you're successful.
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah, and that's I look at it the same way. Look, you could if you could choose your problems. I have to pay taxes, or how am I going to pay my light bill? I'll choose paying taxes every day. I'd rather have the comfort of knowing, okay, damn it, I made $1 million. Now I got to pay a few 100,000 in taxes. Just woe is me.
First
No,
world
yes, I
problems.
made $1 million. Let's what I look forward to the day that I have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. That is a joyous day because that means I am making millions. Look forward to it. I look forward to it.
It's fun to do.
It is. It is. Well, Rocky, thank you so much for sharing a bit about Profit First. If individuals want to learn more about Profit First, how can they reach out to you to learn more?
Can I ask them a favor first?
Sure.
All right. I know some of you doctors, like, you got to learn to say thank you. And the way you say thank you today is wherever you're listening to this, there's got to be a like button on there. Go ahead and give a nice thank you to our host, right? Hit that like button. And I bet you know another doctor who needs to listen to this episode. So go ahead and share it with them. Be cool. That's the way you say thank you. And I know Johans will like that. And then when you're done with that, come find my podcast. I have 2 podcasts. One is called Profit Answer Man, where literally all we talk about is how to be profitable in business. But my other podcast is called Richer Soul. And on that one, we talk about how to live the ultimate life. Tagline is, you got rich, now what? Because the money isn't going to make you happy.
Mm. I didn't know about the second podcast. I knew about the first. I missed that in my outline. Huh. I'm more interested in the second one. That's good
I
because that's
know.
something that I've been working on. I've been working on personally is defining my enough.
Oh, yeah. That's a question most
Yeah.
people can't answer. How much is enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and
Big.
going back to that statement I made about, making millions and paying hundreds of thousands in taxes. I say that kind of tongue in cheek. I've realized I don't need to make millions of dollars. There were 10 years ago, but oh yeah, I'm going to make millions of dollars one day. Now, sure, maybe if I write a book and I get a huge book deal and my podcast just takes off and they're like, here's a check from Spotify for millions. Okay, cool. But the drive to go out there and go and try to create, I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it. So I am very interested in kicking into some episodes to learn more about that. Okay, you're rich now. Now what? Because like I like to share with clients all the time and prospects is you made the money. The money doesn't make you. So you can't be defined just by what's in your bank account, what's in your retirement account, or how many commas are in your paycheck.
Very true.
Okay, you did it. Great. You're doing it. But now what? Is it defining you, or are you defining what it does for you? So yeah, we can nerd out on that too. We can. So as Rocky said, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend that you got some financial literacy today and you want to share it with them, because what good is having something good, something awesome, if you can't share it with others? The last time you saw a great movie, you said, hey, I just watched this great movie. By the way, I did watch a great episodic called Shogun on Hulu. That was incredible. See, look at me. I'm just making money for Hulu just like that because it was great. I enjoyed it. So if you enjoyed this episode, like Rocky said, give us a little like button. Tell somebody else, hey, I learned a little bit about Profit First and about being a new doctor, and especially if that friend of yours is transitioning from medical school to residency into practicing. This would be some great information for them. So until next time, which is actually going to be in a few minutes, I have 2 podcasts today. So when you see that I'm also wearing a purple shirt again, for those of us following along on YouTube, yes, I recorded 2 episodes in the same day and didn't change my shirt. Why should I? It's just a podcast. We're having fun, but I am going to act like it's, next week or something. I don't know. We'll see. Until next time, you all have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you.
I'm back. Wasn't that a great show? I hope you learned something. I know I did. Now, before you go trying anything you heard today, remember, it is not intended to be specific tax or legal advice. If you need that, go see a CPA or an attorney. If you would like any complimentary consultation with a knowledgeable advisor, visit moneyscript.com and schedule a 15-minute consultation. Want Johans to come speak at your next event? Go to the MoneyScript website for that too. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. MoneyScript Wealth Management is a registered financial advisory service in multiple states. Want to learn more? Get the full disclosure on our website, moneyscript.com.